All right, we left off yesterday on page 314 talking about the client ID mode attribute. All right, and they mention here, it says you need to know how ASP.NET creates a client ID. That's the ID attribute that ASP.NET assigns to an HTML element. We talked about that yesterday. It's something internal that the system sets up for you, okay? Says, as you've seen, ASP.NET typically uses the ID of a server control as the client ID. All right? So in other words, it tries to use whatever you've named it when possible. It says, however, if a server control is placed inside of a parent control like a content placeholder, and you'll see that today, ASP.NET kind of gets confused. All right? I'm on 314. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to go and put these things together. So since it's inside of something called main placeholder, and it was called LST cart, it becomes main placeholder underscore LST cart. All right. And the author says the good news is if you don't like the way that things are named by the system, all right, it says you can control how the client ID is created by using the client ID mode attribute of a page. All right. Now you'll notice it says here the default of it is predictable. All right. It says, and we're going to be looking at this. It says since the default values for all controls is inherent, their mode will also be predictable. It's called predictable because you can predict the client ID the ASP.NET is going to have based on the ID you gave it. All right. And there are other things you can change them to. It's a little bit funky, for lack of better words. It says if you're converting existing pages so that the master page that you've already written the CSS for, you may want to change the client mode ID to static, and I believe we're going to do that. I don't know, I did the exercise before class today. Or if you're converting an older application, it says you might want to change it to auto ID. All right. If you're starting from scratch, typically you're going to be just fine. Okay. All right. So if that wasn't good enough for you and you need a little bit more on what these values are, you can see them in the chart that's on the middle of page 315 in the book. All right. Again, it's not my idea in here. You're not getting tested on what does this acronym mean, etc. You're not getting any of that stuff this year. In fact, I was even thinking about this, and I'll bring it up now. I'm going to float it now, and you can think about it. I was actually thinking of having just one more test. And finishing up Chapter 9 today, and we'll actually probably have time to go into Chapter 10. Finishing up 10 tomorrow, then going into 11, all right? And then, depending on how hard the test is, I would either give you 2 days to work on it, Thursday and Friday, or Friday. All right? And believe it or not, even with all those chapters, it's not going to be that hard. Think about what you're going to do. All right?
10's just bootstrap, isn't it?
Yes. But 10's bootstrap some stuff we haven't talked about before.
Okay.
All right? And badges and some stuff like that. Okay. All right? But it's going to be a lot of stuff that's fairly straightforward to use. But for that loan app, again, as I told you, from Chapter 6, you're going to be adding at least 1 or 2 radio buttons, at least 1 or 2 list boxes. I don't know if a drop-down list will make sense. And possibly some of the other controls, I haven't written it yet. From Chapter 7, I can guarantee you're going to put a validation summary in. All right, you're just going to. And you might do one of the other validators we haven't talked about. All right, Chapter 8 that we just finished, we even said we're not going to do anything from there. So that's one chapter that's out. Chapter 9, you're going to have to either take your application and, like we're going to do at the end of this chapter, convert it into a master page application, or start from scratch and then copy your stuff in. And that's going to be up to you. From Chapter 10, it's going to be adding a few of these bootstrap things that we'll start talking about today, and we'll get into more tomorrow. And from Chapter 11, it's kind of prettying up URLs. The good news is if we do that, then by the end of the week, we're done with the first 2 sections of the book. And if she ever does get back to me, we're ready to start. And if she doesn't get back to me, or if I get, if she tells me she's still thinking about it or whatever, then next week we'd start on databases. We're going to have some review on databases too. You may or may not think you need it. I think we all do, including me. All right, just to go back and talk about primary keys and how to create a database, etc. Just want to take it nice and slow, and there's no reason why we shouldn't. All right. Again, the heart and soul of this book is on chapters 12 through 18. Chapter 12 is totally review. There's no homework from it. There's nothing at the end of the chapter for you to do. It's going over all those concepts that we've talked about before. And I believe, I really and truly do, all of you did really well on the database component of the class. Everybody in here, okay? But that said, it's done a little bit differently in here because when we did it in the past, we weren't really mixing it in with code as much. We were just looking at the database almost by itself. We did look a little bit at the end of the C#, and we talked a little bit about database, and that's going to be more like what we're going to get into starting next week. All right, so how to create and develop content pages. What I'm going to show you right now, and just so you see it, this is what we're going to create later. But later what we're going to do is we're going to create a site.master. All right, and I actually just want to show you what it's going to look like. So we're going to create this site.master. All right, once we do, we're going to take all of this stuff right there. That's from the other file. That's from that request file. I don't know if you remember, we brought that stuff in. We're going to just copy it over here. Then we can remove it from the request.aspx file. And again, the reason we want it in our site.master is that all files can then use it. All files that are built as content pages off the master page. And we don't have to worry about reloading that stuff in. Okay. Then, if you notice in here, there's nothing in there. If we had something special that we wanted to do on every page in the head section, we'd put it in there. All right? Typically, you're not going to put anything in there. Some people even say, oh, you should just remove that. No, you shouldn't. All right? The recommendation is that you leave it in. All right. Then we're going to come in here, and if you look, this is the whole, let me make this a little smaller, but that's the whole body. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a form horizontal class. Into our div, we're going to add class equal container. We're going to copy this exactly, directly. We are going to copy this from the request.aspx file. We are going to copy this from the request.aspx file. And this is already given to us. We're going to change this because the author asks you to, and instead of calling it content placeholder 1, the author wants you to call it main placeholder. Why? Because we add the main. But what I want you to understand is when you run this, what we're doing is we're taking the stuff that you had previously in its own page on request.aspx, and you're putting it right in here. Right in there. That's what happens. You're dropping it right in there. And then we're going to do the same thing with the confirm page. All right? So I've got it done, but just to show you, it's not going to look, that's the idea. It's not going to look any different than it did when we got done yesterday. So you've seen this, so I'm going to just come in here. All right, change that to submit. Looks the same. All right. Oh, must be after arrival date. I guess I screwed that up. That should have been the 21st. Submit, and there we get it. Pretty much looks the same as it did. Okay. The only thing is that they ask you to do on the confirm that it wasn't done before is they ask you to take this and make them blue. There's a reason that the author does that, and we'll get into it in just a little bit. And notice if I click modify, it goes back again. So if I decide, no, there's going to be 4 people, I can submit again. It's changed to 4. I can click confirm, and I still get my message down at the bottom. So none of it's changed. But the idea is these two forms are now part of a master form. All right? And again, just so you see it, because I'm just showing you the stuff that we're going to be doing. We're going to come in here and notice that our site master says master here. All right? Don't have to hit enter, but I can. Whoops. And now when I go over to the other ones, when I go over to the request, we're going to have to add something in there, and that is this. We're going to tell it what its master page is, all right, and we're going to set its client mode to static. Again, that client mode of static on page 315, the author says the client ID is the same as the server control ID. This can cause conflicts, such as when there are several instances of the same user control on the page. There are not. All right? And when we get to the confirm one, same thing. All right? Other than that, most of the stuff we're doing is moving stuff around. And hopefully what you'll understand then is, yes, you can do it this way. This is actually a really good exercise. Give the author credit for writing good exercises. But you start to see it's like, wow, it's really easy to screw this thing up because you're removing this, you're copying this, you're moving this there, and it's real easy to screw it up. That's why the author is saying it's much better, it's much easier to start with a master page to begin with. All right? Okay. So the author says here, once you've created a master page, you can create and develop the content pages for it. And that's what follows. So what we are going to end up doing, and I've already been showing you this, again, it says the starting code for a new content page that uses site master. I've already shown you this on the other one. Okay? You have to add that. And in the content area, okay, you may or may not have anything in the content areas. And to make it even more confusing, if you decide you want to, you can have more than one content area in either the head section, although I don't know why that would ever be done, but quite often you'll have more than one content area in your main section, your body. You can do that. And some pages, for example, could have one content area and some could have multiple ones. You can do that. All right, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it. So the author says here, 2 ways to add a content page. All right, right-click on the master page. This is if it's a new one. All right, so right-click on the master page and choose Add Content Page. All right, you can see it gives it the web form followed by some number by default. All right, or you can right-click on the project in the Solution Explorer. Choose Add Web Form with Master Page. That's new. We've done Add Web Form before, but this is a new one. It's Add Web Form with Master Page. You've got to make sure you add that one. And again, if you do that, it's going to have a dialog box that appears because it's possible for you to have more than one master. So it's going to ask you what master you want this content page, all right, associated with. We're only going to have one master, so that's not going to be an issue. We're going to be doing this, how to convert a regular ASP.NET page to a content page. I'm not going to read this to you. I just showed it to you. And I think it makes much more sense if we go over it and go through it as a class. Honest to God, I have no problem if we're done with this around 1:30 and we take a break. If this takes us till 3 o'clock and we really take our time, I don't care. I'd rather do it and have it make sense to you and have it work for everybody than try to blaze our way through it and just see how fast we can get it done and have people be screwing it up. All right? Next, starting on page 318, how to add content to a page. You can virtually add anything, any ASP.NET tool, or any any ASP.NET, tool, control, or any HTML control, or any validation control, or any database control, etc. It's just a page, but it's a page that is connected to another page. And the key thing for you to realize, a lot of this terminology, for lack of better words, was pretty much stolen. All right, it was pretty much stolen from the HTML world. Okay, because we've got we've got a content area up here, and the reason I'm showing it to you up here is that's part of the head section, and you know this, that what's in the head section doesn't show on the page. Everything that's in this content area down here, so that content area, that's all stuff that's in the body. So that all does show on the page. So you can set it up any way you want, but quite often, and this is what you're going to see when we go through this in just a little bit, all right, is what we're going to have in here is we're going to have a header and we're going to have a footer. That's going to be in our site.master. So both pages are going to have the same header and the same footer. But the content that goes in here is going to be different for a request as opposed to a confirmation. And that's where we're going to grab the stuff from the existing pages and we're going to put it right in there. All right? And like I said, I may be making it sound like it's very hard. It's not. It's a little laborious. And again, I believe that after you go through this, you realize, oh, that's why you make a master page first. Because then you don't have to go through all this garbage. All right. Once you put the stuff in there, you can, again, customize it any way you want to or need to customize it. All right. Such as the author mentions here on page 321. How to set a default title in a master page and override it on a content page. Well, if you set a title attribute, again, I'm going to go back here and show you this. Okay, if you set, notice it says Chapter 9 reservations. Everybody see that? Right there? Well, where that actually was set, is right here in the master page. You quite often do that because then any page you either don't want to change the title on or forget to, at least there's a title on it. All right, so that's the default title. But as they mention, and start to mention in here, you can change anything virtually on any page that you want to or need to change. All right, so it says here how to set a default title and then how to override it. Now, notice what it says in here. In your page thing, you put title equal in there. See that? What that means is, if I wanted to override, you already saw this. You saw how this said Chapter 9 reservations. If I wanted to override it, I could come into the request page here, and up here, I could put title equal up there and give it a different title if I wanted to do so. We're not told to do that here, but we could. How to set default content in a master page? You can just drop things in. All right, if you want to do that or need to do that. Now notice this is what they did in the Halloween Superstore. And it says the number of days until Halloween. What that says is that means that, notice it says ID equal footer placeholder, that unless told otherwise, that'll be the footer on each page in the Halloween Superstore. And if you don't want it, you have to overwrite it or remove what's there or whatever. All right. And again, that's what's in here. All right. Next, how to expose a public property in a master page. And it says there another way to provide content is by using public properties. You know what public variables are. You know, for example, even in here, we, believe it or not, we have looked at public variables because when we've done, let's see, I I think you have to remove them for here, but let's see. If I come up here, in fact, there it is. Even though it says private, it's public to this particular file. In other words, we don't have to pass it around. But what you can do is you can make variables public by putting them in a master page. Then they're available on any content page that is created from that master page. All right. So it says here you can create public properties in a master page that exposes elements of the master page to the content pages. A public property can have both a get and a set. If you give it a get and a set, you already saw those get sets the other day, but if you give it a get and a set, that means not only can you read it, you can change it. If you give it only a get, it's read only. If you give it a set, it's write only. You don't typically do that, but it's possible to do it if you want to. So it says you can use public properties to expose properties of the master page itself. All right, and it can be variables, or it can even be things like the width of the page, the server controls on the page, etc. If you do that, and they mention this on the bottom of page 323, it says to access a master page's public property, the content page must have a master type directive with either a type name or a virtual path attribute. That's pretty heavy stuff. Right? But the bottom line is sometimes when you are writing an application that is using one or more master pages, it's like, geez, I'm really stuck. I really would like to do this, and I can't figure out a way to do it. The idea is there's a lot more here than what we're doing. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. All right, and then the chapter pretty much ends by talking about this shopping cart application. So it says the chapter ends by presenting 2 pages of the shopping cart app that use the same master page. Okay? Now, I just want you to see something, because when we get into chapter, I thought it was in here. Maybe it's not. Let me check the page. Oh, he took all this out. Okay. I just wanted to show you something here, and that is that if we come back, let's see. What we've looked at in here is we've come in, we've looked at content, and you saw how it brought all those CSS files in there. We had been using our own external CSS folder, but the recommendation is that you put it in content, so all your CSS is together. All right, so we've looked at this. We have not looked at the fonts, but that just is, you know, let's say that on the bottom of your page, you wanted to make a link to your Facebook page. All right, you can do that, and you can put the Facebook glyphicon in there. Okay, so I don't think that's over and above anything. We've done stuff like that before. I don't think that that's that hard to do. All right, the model, what we looked at in here is that's where our code was. Those were all, if you remember, those were all our getters and setters. All right, and the scripts, we haven't touched any of that stuff. We basically just added it to our programs. But what I want you to know, and maybe you've seen this before, maybe you haven't, if I right mouse click on here and I choose add, and I choose add ASP.NET folder, you'll notice that the last one that's in there, you see where it says theme? If I decided I wanted to have 2 different themes for my Halloween Superstore, and they used to do this in the old book. It looks like it's not in here anymore, and I was surprised that it wasn't. But they had one theme in there that looked like this, just like that. So every page had that on the top, had that on the side, etc. But then they built another one where basically the whole thing here was white, but it looked like it had a background image that looked like spider webs. So you had a different theme, so you could change themes. And the reason I'm bringing that up, and the reason that that's important is, again, it wouldn't be that big a stretch for you to ask somebody, what's your favorite color? They say yellow. Boom. Make the background color yellow. What's your second favorite color? Red. You make the text red. You can do that. You can set up customized themes if you want to or need to do that. All right? So, again, the author says here, Figure 8 presents this. There's a master page, and the master page has two more types of default content. First, it provides a default but empty H1 at the top of each page. All right? Now notice it's empty, which means, as you know, you don't have to use it. Why am I telling you that? Because as far as I can tell, it's used on the shopping cart page. It's not used on the order page. See that? See the difference? All right. But we could use it on both if we wanted to. Not only that, it's not mandatory that you put it in there as a default H1 tag. The author is showing you that you can do that. All right. Second, the master page itself is going to provide content for the footer. And if you look, hopefully you agree with me, there's no footer here. There's no footer text. Here, notice, there's only 182 days until Halloween. All right, so that's the kind of footer text you will get by default. But again, you can override it. You may decide that other than, maybe you want that on every page. Or maybe you don't want that on their checkout page. All right, or you want something else on their checkout page. And I think that's pretty much what the author's getting to here. All right. So the first thing they talk about is the ASPX code for the master page. And as the author typically does and does a good job of here, this is all the stuff we're going to be worried about. All right. Again, notice there's the master page. Client ID mode is set to static. This is the author showing you that it is possible for you to put a default title in there if you want to, and you'll notice, all right, you'll notice that right now there is nothing in between the content placeholder tags in the head section. And I will tell you that with all the work I've ever done on this, I hardly ever, if ever, put anything in that head one. There typically isn't a reason to do so. All right. Now you could think about it and say, "Oh, Jeff, I thought of a reason." It's maybe you'd be right. All right. But I'm just saying I've never come up with a reason for doing so. All right. Now notice in the main area here, we've got a content placeholder, and again, there is nothing in there. And then we've got another content placeholder we add in our footer section, and that one does have regular ASP code in it, which says, by default, it's going to say that. All right? Days until Halloween. Well, if you remember, it said 182 days until Halloween, right? There will have to be some kind of a calculation which will take October 31st and subtract from that, all right, the current date. And if the current date is greater than that, you'll probably use an absolute value function. All right, so it wouldn't matter then. Okay, so the author says this master page uses a bulleted list server control for navigation. So it can use the tilde operator. I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to get across. All right, except they're using this bulleted list. All right, that said, if we look on the previous page, there ain't no stinking bulleted list. Yeah, it is. It's an unordered list, but we remove the bullets. Okay, you've done that kind of thing before. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to have you do yours like this or like this, where you put it along the top. But you will do one or the other, I can guarantee that. All right? All right. Then they jump into, on page 328 and 329, the code behind for the master page. And a lot of it is what I told you. Notice what they're doing. They're figuring out how many days there are until Halloween. So they're calling a routine that they wrote right there in the blue. All right? So that's going to call this. And then you check, because if it is Halloween, you say Happy Halloween. If Halloween's tomorrow, you say tomorrow is Halloween. Otherwise, you say how many days there are until Halloween. That's all. Now, if you notice, because this is kind of important, if we look at the description here on the bottom of page 329, most events for the content page are raised before the corresponding events in the master page. So it's working its way from the inside out, is what the author is saying. Similarly, events for a content page's controls are raised before the master page's controls. Right? And the last thing that's in here, we only have like about 4 more pages. The ASPX code for the order page is shown on page 331. And if we look here, all right, the first content control has got all the stuff for our main content. The second one has got the default. It actually overrides the default. So in here, okay, you might say, well, what do you mean? It says here, ID equal footer, content placeholder. There's nothing in there, correct? And if you remember, on the order page, there was no footer. So we're not putting anything in there. We're overriding it by putting in nothing. Okay. So you've got 2 choices when you do things like this. If you decide, there's no real litmus test, but let's say I've got a site with 10 pages on it. If I'm going to have the same thing on 5 or 6 of the pages, I'll probably want to create some kind of a master page to hold that. All right. You don't have to do it. You can write, we've written these so far, we haven't used master pages. But again, the recommendation is that you start with a master page always, even if your site currently has only one, if it has only one page in it. All right, and then finally, they go through the ASPX code for the cart page. All right, and this is on 332 and 333. The author says it presents the code for the cart page. Like the order page, this doesn't need to do anything in the head element, so the content control has been deleted. So again, we don't need it. You keep it, please listen to this, you keep that content control in the header. You keep it in for your master page. If you're not doing anything with it in the content pages, then it can be removed. And notice the last thing. We're not going to do this, but notice what it says. Master.header text equal your shopping cart. Well, again, I'm going to just jump back a couple pages. That's this. Remember, it's an empty H1 by default, and we want to put something in there, okay? And the author is showing you that indeed what the author is showing you here, this is one way to do it. All right? And that's what's done right there. Did I give you the Chapter 9 starter file? I don't remember if I did or not. So take a look and see if I did. If I did not, I'm going to just copy it over to here. And we're all going to start with the same one. Make sure I'm giving you the right one here. There is no master. Yeah, that looks like the right one. Copy. So can everybody see? Okay, can everybody see then on the flash drive, which I'm about to throw at Brady, that we've got this AWD1111 reservation. Everybody see that? That's the one that you all want to copy to your desktop or to wherever you've been putting these programs. whole exercise is just one page, front and back.
Hopefully.
Yeah, that must have been a hell of an internship. So I'm gonna wait for a couple minutes while everybody has a chance to get that copied onto their system. In fact, it's 1:20, let's just start up at 1:35. All right, that should give everybody a chance to copy it, hopefully.